Hi, my name is Richard Thompson, and I am currently a pipeline technical director at Netflix Animation. I guess my route into the industry was a little bit circular. I did a degree in engineering science at Emmanuel College, Cambridge. Did a PhD in offshore dynamics at Jesus Oxford. Went to work in the City of London, did the standard City of London route for a couple of years. So I was a management consultancy for a little bit, and then technology at Goldman Sachs. But I was always interested in the film industry. I couldn't quite get rid of the bug. So I did a couple of years at Goldman's, and then they had an IPO, which was, I think, supposed to be a bit of a golden handcuff, but was actually a little bit of cash, which let me resign actually and go restudy for a year. So I then went off to Bournemouth University, did a master's. I have to think way back now, just been a minute. Then did a conversion course in computer graphics for a year. Applied for a bunch of jobs in the UK and a bunch of jobs in the US. Having applied for a bunch before I did the conversion course and didn't get a look in at all. And then got a job at Pixar Animation, so that got me over to the United States. That was only supposed to be for about 6 months, and then here we are 20 years later. Not quite, so a bit of a circular route. But yeah, started off on the sort of artistic side. I was doing shader writing, texture painting, effects animation. Always had a bit of a technical side to things, so kept on doing technology as things went by, and as the industry kind of morphed over the years, it started becoming more of a sort of client vendor type of model. Here in the United States, started morphing more towards that side. So I think the job I had, sort of the biggest sort of job that I had just before Netflix came along, was a place called Disney Toon Studios, which was the thing that kind of introduced me to the whole kind of client vendor side of working. Fortunately, Disney Toons got closed down a couple of years back, so then a little bit meandering, and now Netflix, which is taking sort of the whole client vendor model to the extreme, with more simultaneous projects than one can shake a stick at. So lots going on there, lots of exciting stuff coming down the pipe. So it's a very interesting place to be. And I'm noticing that I've got friends now beginning to pop up at Apple and Amazon. So it looks like a lot of these sort of tech companies are now beginning to sort of enter this sort of computer graphics, visual effects type of space of sort of content creation, with a lot of sort of tech and deep software knowledge to back it up. So I think it's actually going to be quite an interesting time going forward. So yeah, that's kind of my story, circular story. Well, my inspirations come from various forms actually. So it depends on which road we're going down. I mean, if we're talking sort of life in general, and I actually I play classical piano quite a lot, so I'm always impressed by any concert pianist. You hear the tales of them learning Liszt B minor sonata in a day, or Rachmaninoff's third concerto in 2, and that would take me at least a year. Yeah, I'm inspired by those type of memory tricks and that type of coordination between brain and fingers. I think on the technology visual effects side of things, I think what's going on right now with the whole volume, the stuff that's going on in The Mandalorian, where people have that sort of Unreal Engine powering that real-time LED field behind the actor, I think is actually an amazing step forward in technology at the moment. I know a lot of the actors and producers aren't very happy with what's going on with Warner Brothers and HBO at the moment, and all of that stuff going straight to streaming, but I absolutely love that. At least I can actually see things. Just the general sort of push for photoreal and real-time rendering, I think, is actually quite an amazing thing, which is going to revolutionize the industry even more. And I think if a lot of the studios can maybe get away from being pure sort of service providers into more sort of content producers, I think that's going to be very exciting for people. I think that's going to add probably quite a lot of stability to those studios as well. I think that's kind of long overdue. So it certainly helps sort of get involved in that type of push. So, you know, I was working at, like I said, I was working at an investment bank, and I had a sort of, I couldn't quite get the film bug out of my system, so I kept on applying for all of these visual effects jobs, and I wasn't getting anywhere at all. So I think I'd applied to Sony, ImageWorks, had an interview there, because I think Goldman's had sent me over to New York at one point, so I took a break and went over to Los Angeles, and I wasn't getting anywhere there. And then once I did the conversion course and actually had a demo reel to actually show to people, that's when some offers started coming in. So I'd applied to some places in London, and I'd applied to some places in Los Angeles, well, California in general. And so what ended up happening is that I got a job at Mill Film, working on Tomb Raider and Cats and Dogs. I guess like every facility worked on cats and dogs. But I also had an offer from Pixar. But just with the way that immigration works, you have to go through quite a long sort of process to get the whole H-1B visa to come on over. So what I did is I went to Mill Film for a while, worked there, and told them straight up that, yeah, I'm only going to be here for a while because then I'm going to go up to the USA. I think if I could go back, I think the bigger studios, you know, I can speak for Pixar and DreamWorks. I mean, I don't know so much about ILM, but because they're big, they tend to compartmentalize their work into sort of specific departments. And I think if that's your sort of first experience in the industry, I think it gets a little bit tougher to get a bigger handle on how the whole piece fits together. So if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I'd probably say to stick with Mill Film actually maybe for a few years before attacking those bigger studios, because a place like Mill Film, which I think is back actually, they went out of business for a while, but I think Mill Film's back. I think those places tend to like generalists quite a lot. They like people who can take a sort of big cut of all of the processes that go on. And I think that those folks tend to have sort of a very, very deep knowledge of the entire process from end to end. Whereas, like I said, you can get a little bit compartmentalized in some of these bigger studios, and I think it takes like a longer time to sort of get that sort of general breadth. So, you know, you look at the people from, you know, quote unquote, back at that time who came out of Mill Film and Cinesight and all of those places that were sort of within walking distance and in Soho. I mean, they've taken up these, you know, very impressive sort of leadership positions all the way around the industry now. And I think a lot of that's just due to the breadth of knowledge, the breadth of exposure that you can get when you work in a small facility where there is no one else to hand over the compositing or the shading work or whatever. You just have to sit down and do it yourself and run it through. And I'm definitely seeing that sort of influence throughout the industry. So that's what I would advise myself to do if I was going back, is stick with the smaller place for maybe just a little bit longer, a few more years, then deal with the bigger places some other time. They're not going to go anywhere. So.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, because for me, it was film school, and that just gave you the breadth of the entire pipeline.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so and because for graduate school, for me, I had to do all of it. Like you said, you know, it's at Howard, it was like, here's a piece of paper, go make a movie. And so after that, you know, and doing that and going to Los Angeles, it was like, well, where would you like me in the pipeline? Because I've had to do all of it.
Right.
I think that's really great advice. I think that's really, really great advice.
And I think what's interesting as well is, like, you know, the trouble with technology is it doesn't stay still for a second. So, I mean, you just can't know it all. And I think people have to be okay with, you know, you're dealing with someone who, you know, you may or may not consider smart, but let's say they're smart. But then the smart people, they're going to be able to figure this, that, and the other. You know, you can't go into meetings where people say, hey, does anyone know about this process or that process? Or, well, you know, this process only came out 3 weeks ago. So
right.
No, I'm just going to have to sit down and figure it all out.
Yeah.
So, you know, now the big push is, you know, real time and Unreal. And I know that, you know, I deal with Previs quite a lot at Netflix, and I know that they want to do that sort of push into sort of real time technologies. And obviously Netflix, the actual sort of visual effects and live action side of Netflix obviously deals with real time quite a lot, because they've got a volume, and that's how things like Lost in Space, et cetera, are getting filmed. So, you know, it's an ever evolving situation. So I think when you deal with smaller studios, you tend to have that mindset of, okay, I've just got to jump into something new and figure it out, and just kind of not be locked in place into a 20-year-old proprietary pipeline,
Yeah.
which spreadsheets to animate things. I mean, it takes a while for those behemoths to change direction and sort of get up to date.